Hello guys, my name is Craig Stafford and I'll be walking you guys through a beginner's tutorial on 3D Studio Max 2015 Student Edition. This tutorial is for beginners who have never touched the program and wish to learn on its basic components and tools in which they can form and create 3D objects. So let's begin by opening up 3D Studio Max. Now as you can see, this is the scene that we're going to create. This is the objects we're going to create, and I'll show you guys how to go through the process of doing that. But first of all, we have to have a look at the tools. So there's a lot to take in here. Don't stress about it. We'll go through it step by step, just so we don't make it confusing. So to start off, if you go to the top left, you have your Max button. And this is more or less your command and control center when it comes to opening, saving, and exporting files. So if we click that, we have New, which will create a new scene. Reset, which will reset the 3D Studio Max session, the default settings and empty space. Open a 3D Studio Max file, save the file, save the file as something. Import the file, export the file, send to the file as well. Reference, manage, and properties we'll look into further in another tutorial. So up here at the top we've got a shortcut for new scene, for open file, save file. We also have the undo, redo scene option, and a project folder here. This is where everything's saved to. We also have a drop down list here of workspace. For the moment we're going to keep workspace default until you guys get more accustomed to the software and want to create your own workspaces. We're going to keep it default until then. So up here we have a lot of tools up here to sort of help create our 3D Studio Max scene and edit our geometry. This is edit, which will transform, scale and rotate and move the placement of your geometry. We have tools that do everything from your save scene explorers to assign vertex colors. These are quite complicated tools right now. We'll look further into these in later tutorials. You can group and ungroup objects. There's views of your view settings here. There's create primitives and geometry modifiers, animations, graph editors, rendering, customize, max strip, and help. But for now we're just going to worry about what's here in front of us. So these are more shortcuts for undo and redo in case these aren't available. Your select and link and your unlink will select certain objects and make them a group. So if we want to make these three a group, we select that and they're all linked together, and the same with the undo. Bind to space warp is a function we would use if we want to bind a bomb to one of these boxes, for example, and make something explode. But this is a more complex tool and we'll talk about that later in the time. Select object and select by name. Select object is when you use the mouse to select and hover over an object and select it like that. This is when you have an object named, and if you want to select a particular object with this particular name, you can do it here. The most common tools in 3D Studio Max will be these three. This is your select and move, select and rotate, and select and uniform scale. These basically move the geometry around, rotate the geometry, maximize and minimize the geometry. So these are the most common tools. These other tools I'll explain more when we get into more complex geometry and shapes. So we want to create this scene in front of us. So in order to do that, we're first going to click new scene and go, I don't want to save this, so new all. And first of all we want to create a box. So how do you create a box, to say? It's very simple. 3D Studio Max has a lot of built-in geometry to work from that will automatically make you basic geometry in order to work from that. So up here is our geometry bar, and here we go create and standard primitives. Your primitives are your shapes and objects and geometry that you'll use to build stuff. So for the moment, there's many things here. There's box, cone, sphere, geosphere, cylinder, tube, torus, pyramid, teapot, plane. Loads of geometries. But right now we're just going to worry about the box. So let's draw out a 3D box. This is your plane. This is the 3D environment. So say this is all the environment around it, and this is your floor. This is the floor on which you'll be building on. Everything that you create from here will automatically be placed and locked to this floor until you move it. So let's create a box. So select box, and we'll just drag that across there, and drag up and click. Okay. So here we go. Here's our box. It's fine. It's grand. It's true the way I wanted it to come out. But we want to give this a bit more detail, go to more depth of field. So we want to create crates for a game. For example, we are creating crates for a game here. They can be exported into any sort of program or XNA, anything like that, any sort of piece of software. So in order to start modifying the geometry in this box, we need to go up here to our modify panel, click modify. This is the name of our object, and this is the modifier list. So we can either go down here and go, oh look, we want to turn this into a poly. Okay, so turn to poly. We can do that, or we can also go right click, convert to edit poly. I find that just an easier method of, you know, shortcutting this to get a poly straight away. So we'll do that. Now when you're creating geometry, there's three things to keep in mind. We have vertex. Verts are your corners on each shape, which adjusts the shape. You can select these as multiples or singly, like this. We then have edges. The edges geometry in which you can move and change and alter. Then you have polygons, or faces as they're called, and that's how we select the faces. So in order to create a box, we don't even want to worry about the verts right now, we just want to worry about the polygons. So let's click polygon. And we have one selected here, as you can see. So in order to select multiple, we can just press Control and click again. And as you can see here, we think we've selected all the faces, but we haven't. This is your what we call our camera control. And down here we can maximize viewport. So your selected viewport, which is highlighted by this yellow border, we click this and it will maximize this. We just click that again to minimize it. But what we want to do is we want to orbit, rotate around it, so we click the orbit tool. And we just turn around to the faces that we can't see. And select and move tool. And keep holding in Control and select. But say for example we didn't want this selected. Okay, so say no one's going to see this in game, so we want to save in our polygons, so we'll just hit Alt, click, and that'll be selected. We don't want to touch that. No one's going to see the bottom of the object, so that's fine. We'll just work with these upper faces up here. So next thing is, how do we actually add detail to this piece of geometry? So what we do is we have a edit polygon panel here, which does all sorts of things. For this moment we want to do insert, which will insert another polygon inside this polygon. So we'll click settings. Avoid clicking this button and just click the settings button. So settings button. Now we have a wee panel here. So the moment it's at 1. And as you can see, it's not really doing much. It's going up and down, but that's not what we want. What we want to do, instead of going to group, we want to click this and go by polygon. So it'll take each polygon as its own separate entity. And now, as you can see, we can start making this into a box. A nice crate for us. So that seems good. I think we'll round that up to the nearest numbers, so we'll make that a 7. And we'll click. That's good. We're happy with that. Let's go 7. So now we have an extra polygon in here to work with. So now we want to bring this in a bit. So we do this by going into settings and extrude. Hit extrude. And you can see it pops out. What we want to do is bring that in. Now, one thing to be careful of. This we don't want. You never want to have faces overlapping each other, because it'll cause big problems when you come to texturing and altering and verts and polys and all sorts of things. So what you want to do is make sure that the face is a light red. You don't want to be in dark red, because then that's just going to cause, that means that the face is overlapping. It's going to cause some serious problems in later on in the game when you're texturing and other things, as I said. So a nice light red like that is good. So we'll round that up to 7. Perfect. So we'll keep that there. So now, as you can see now, we just click off polygon and click in negative space, and as you can see now is the box. Well, we're looking like a box now. So and we have no extra geometry down here that we didn't need. So that's our box pretty much ready to go. But we want to save space, so we want to make this thin and tall. So how do we do that? We just click the geometry that we've created, left click, that's the entire thing created, and now we go to select a uniform scale, and we just grab the Z axis and bring that up, and then we click on our top frame and use Y and X just to minimize that down a bit, make it a nice square, a nice healthy square. Okay, so select and move. Now, as you can see, these top verts are they don't seem as even as the rest of the object, so what we want to do is we want to bring them down. Now, we could do this by just moving the Z, but then that deforms the whole geometry of the shape. We don't want that. We want it to stay the same sort of length and shape that it is now. So what we're going to do is we're going to play with the verts. We just hit vertex, and just to make things easier on ourselves, we'll go front. The thing you need to be careful when working in perspective is if I select, say, oh look, I want this vert here selected, I'll drag it. You actually have 2 verts selected here, so that's going to alter 2 verts, and maybe you don't want that. What we want to do is we want to select all the verts in this top line. So what we do is we just drag across in the front view, and that's selected all of them. And what we do is we want to just drag this down. Okay, so that border's looking a bit even now, which is grand. We're not too worried about it being perfect, just so it's sort of similar the whole way around. And then we do the same to the vertices below here, and just drag them a bit. Perfect, there we go. So we just click off the vertex, done. Now, this is our pivot point. This is where everything moves by. If we rotate our box, for example, if we rotate our box, it rotates by that pivot point. And that's not what we want. We want this pivot point to be directly in the middle, so if we rotate it or move it or anything, it'll rotate from that position. In order to fix that, we'll go to Hierarchy, click Hierarchy, go to Effect Pivot Point Only. So now there's a new cursor on top of this. So what we do is we just drag this in generally into the middle, and click off this. So now if I rotate this, it rotates from the middle of the box. That's what we want. So we'll just click off that. And that's our box. Our box is good to go. And let's just drag that down to the bottom. Now, we want to make about 3 of these. And a simple way of doing this, to duplicate an object, what we do is we hold shift on the x-axis and just drag across. Just to about a wee bit of width, right there, and let go. We want to make a copy of it, not an instance. Let's just make a copy for now. And call box 2 is fine for the scene. Click OK. So then we want to put another one on top of it. So then we just hold shift again. Just there, left click again, copy, OK. And just pull it over the top. So now we have a nice wee stack of crates here. So the next piece of geometry I want to show you guys is how to build a barrel. And by building a barrel, we first go to cylinder. So click cylinder. And in order to draw a cylinder, which would make it easier for ourselves, we're going to use the top view. And just, you can drag the camera, we can pan the camera easy with a shortcut by using your left middle mouse button if you have it. And the same for zooming in and out. This will be a lot easier for you guys. One of the hardest parts of 3D Studio Max is just having to pan the camera and working with the perspective and the front and things like that. But once you get it down, it should be alright for you. You can change the settings, but usually default settings are good for new beginners. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a cylinder for our barrel. So what we'll do is we'll just pick a point and draw it, and then pull it up. Okay, so because this program has saved my settings, it actually has about 8 segments. It will originally come out for you guys like this, but most barrels have indents in them, and in order to make that easier for us in the future, what we do is we're going to bump that up. So we'll make about, we'll say we'll make about 6 segments, which is grand. So there's 6 segments on our sides. Our cap segments here will increase how many segments are on the top, as we can see here. Unlike it being 1 polygon there, it's now turned into many polygons by even adding adding 2 segments. So for the moment, we'll just keep that on. We'll drag that over there. So we've got our 6 height segments that we can put the indents in. 18 sides for this model would be perfect. It's perfectly rounded. If I up the size, it'll just create more polys, which we don't need right now. So 18 will do the job. Sorry, 18, bam. So next time we want to start creating indents. So let's go right click, convert to editable poly. Then select your polygons. And for this, an easy way of selecting the polygons the whole way around is just select a poly here, hold shift, click again. We now have all these polys selected the whole way around. So the next thing is we just hit insert, just ever so slightly. That's okay, round it up to about 2. Hit OK. And then we just go extrude. Now as you can see, it's going the one direction. Okay, we don't want that. We want it to go in itself, so what we do is we hit local normal. So now you can see it's going in and out, and we want to just bring that in a wee bit. Just a wee tiny bit. So we'll say 11. 11 will do the job. Maybe not 11, maybe we'll put it minus 13. Okay, that'll do. That'll do. So now what we want to do is we want to apply this. Now the nice thing with 3D Studio Max is if I click this and hit shift and then just hit insert in settings, it'll save the settings from what I previously just created, so I just hit OK. And the same with extrude. Done, minus 13. And that's our barrel done. As basic oil barrel, as far as that goes, that's it, done. So you've got your scene there. Our next tutorial, I'll be showing you about putting down some planes and walls and environment and getting some lighting in the scene. But so far that's the basics of geometry we can work with. I hope this has been very useful to you guys, and I wish you best of luck. Pretty exciting.